Hi there. YouTube wants me to make a trailer for my channel, but I don't like talking about myself. So instead, I'm going to tell a story. It's a story of ancient history, American schoolchildren, and this guy. And if you think you've heard this story before, bear with me. This version has a twist. So in the 1890s, a New York minister, author, and socialist by the name of Francis Bellamy wrote a Pledge of Allegiance for schoolchildren to recite while saluting the American flag. Bellamy's pledge was made in an interesting context of post-Civil War patriotism, 20th century nativism, and a marketing campaign to sell flags to schools. But we don't have time to get into that stuff now. What I'm interested in is the salute that went along with his pledge. That salute changed a bit over the years, but the most common iteration was an outstretched right arm, hand slightly above eye level with the palm down. It looked something like this. If that gesture looks familiar, well, we'll get there. Bellamy's associate, James B. Upham, supposedly came up with the salute after hearing the pledge for the first time, but the gesture came to be known as the Bellamy Salute. Like many things in Western history, it was borrowed from ancient Rome. Back in the day, emperors used the salute to greet crowds, orators used it to punctuate their speeches, and gladiators used it in the Colosseum. The magazine that Bellamy worked for was successful in getting his pledge featured in the quadricentennial Columbus Day celebrations in 1892, and from there it spread to schools around the country. It's worth mentioning for non-American viewers that the Pledge of Allegiance is still a daily ritual in most elementary schools here. But Americans don't still use the Bellamy Salute, because in the 1930s, European fascist groups also became interested in imitating Roman rituals, and they adopted the gesture for their own propaganda. There's some interesting history to be had in the lead up to World War II, as American isolationists and interventionists commented on the Bellamy Salute's, well, unsavory international relations. But that became moot when America entered the war. Soon, the Bellamy Salute was swapped for the now universal hand over heart. So there you have it, an example of how ancient history can influence and be appropriated by modern politics. History is alive all around us. There's just one problem with this story. The Romans, they didn't salute that way. The first known instance of the Roman salute comes from this painting by David, The Oath of the Horatii, which features a scene from Roman history, but it was painted in 1785. David probably drew inspiration from Roman sculptures, which show figures with outstretched hands. But as historian David Winkler argues in his book, The Roman Salute, Cinema, History, Ideology, no Roman art shows a gesture exactly like that in David's painting, and the Romans didn't use any salute the same way that Bellamy or the Nazis did. In the 100 years between David and Bellamy, the salute was popularized in artwork, theater, and even early cinema. Popular culture of the 19th and 20th centuries often associated the salute with the Romans, but it was also used in ancient epics set in Egypt and in the Middle East, and it could show up in other genres as well. In all likelihood, Bellamy and Upham weren't trying to imitate the Romans at all. Instead, they adopted a relatively common gesture that was familiar to contemporary Americans. How did the salute come to be associated with ancient Rome and then with fascism? According to Winkler's book, it was largely thanks to movies. Italian and then later German fascists were enthralled by epic movies that featured the salute, and it was one of Mussolini's predecessors and mentors who adopted the gesture in his rallies. Films also played an important role in associating the salute with fascism through Nazi propaganda like Triumph of the Will and US parodies like The Great Dictator. But before long, the Nazi salute had taken on a life of its own, and it reshaped how people perceived the history that it was supposedly drawn from. After the fall of the Third Reich, Hollywood continued to make movies set in ancient Rome, and it borrowed the trappings of Hitler's regime to tell new stories about government control, individualism, and religious persecution. For example, 1951's Quo Vadis showed Romans saluting and goose-stepping to draw a connection between the persecution of early Christians and the treatment of Jews in the Holocaust. From Quo Vadis, the salute spread to other films like Ben-Hur and Spartacus, which also feature Romans as the bad guys. When filmmakers want to present the Romans more sympathetically, though, such as in 2010's Centurion, the salute is conspicuously absent. If you're watching a movie set in ancient Rome and you're not sure if the Romans are the heroes or the villains, just ask yourself, are they acting like Nazis? This rule holds true for other genres as well, which is how we get this scene from Star Wars The Force Awakens, which looks like a rally out of Triumph of the Will with the Nazis replaced by stormtroopers. So there you have it, the real story of the Roman salute. Ancient history inspired the art and theater of the 18th and 19th centuries, which turned that inspiration into a largely original and ahistorical gesture. Fascist groups in the 20th century also drew inspiration from ancient history, but whether they realized it or not, their image of the past was influenced by the art and popular culture of the day. Politics eventually turns into history, and with a little help from Hollywood, the legacy of the Third Reich influenced how people perceived evil empires, whether they were based in the ancient Mediterranean or in a galaxy far, far away. And so the cycle continues. This web of history, historical myth, and contemporary politics is endlessly fascinating to me, and I'll be exploring it more here at Historia Nerdorum. I hope I never make videos with titles like 10 Historical Misconceptions or 101 Things Wrong with Braveheart. Instead, I want to use this channel to talk about the connections between history, literature, and popular culture. I'll have some videos that explain interesting topics in medieval history, like what the heck is a friar, and the fascinating life of Joan of Constantinople. Some other videos will talk about fiction that draws inspiration from the Middle Ages. Expect to see at least one more video in that vein on Skyrim. And some videos won't talk about history at all. I'll probably have another video or two about Tolkien somewhere down the line, and at some point I'd like to make a video about this guy. But the common theme in my videos will be this complex web of inspiration between history and popular culture. History and fiction are both about telling stories. Good stories help us understand the world around us, and the best stories, they reshape that world by changing how we perceive it. The complex interplay between our fiction and our nonfiction, our reality and our myth, that bears investigating, and it's never a one-way street. If you're interested in learning more about the supposedly Roman salute, consider checking out Winkler's book. Other historians have studied Francis Bellamy and the physical aspects of the Nazi rituals, but I don't know of anyone else who's focused on the role of cinema in this story. And if you like my approach to history, consider subscribing to this channel. I'll be putting out at least one video a month about history, literature, and popular culture. And between videos, updates can be found on Twitter and Reddit. My next video will use Walt Disney and the Brothers Grimm to look at how we separate the distant past from modernity. Look for that video by the end of July at the latest, and thanks for watching.